For all the hype we've had about the Odyssey, the ending is quite disappointing in its deus ex machina.
Isity.
Hello, and welcome to WINNOW, a couple's close reading of the Iliad and the Odyssey. I'm Owen Gemmer.
I'm Isabella Gemmer. We are married, and we love to talk about books together.
In this podcast, we have been working our way book by book through the entirety of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. This is our final episode of this part of the journey, covering book 24 of the Odyssey.
Yep. So the Odyssey is coming to an end, but many people have asked, what will they read next? And we will answer that question mostly at the end of our discussion. So first, we're going to talk about the Odyssey.
And there will be a chance for your input. So
yes.
We have not fully decided, so we'll explain all of our thoughts and options and, get there at the end. But we're not done yet. We have one final book to talk about, and I shouldn't be as down on it as we have, because that does discredit to Homer to just simply think that the last book is just bad in every way. So it is my turn to give a 60-second summary, and then Bella has the last opening question.
3, 2, 1, begin.
We open actually back in the underworld, where the souls of all of the suitors are being led and ushered into the underworld. They talk with a bunch of other heroes, Achilles and other people who have died. And it's kind of a little bit of a like, womp womp, you guys are all dead and everything's bad for you now. Then we switch to Odysseus, who with Telemachus has gone to his father Laertes' farm, and he kind of approaches him in the garden, and he's digging in the dirt, and they talk. And yet again, Odysseus doesn't reveal who he is. Laertes kind of is lamenting his son's death, and then Odysseus is like, it's me. And then they have another grand reunion yet once again. Everybody's kind of gathering. And then we switch back to Ithaca, where all basically the fathers of all the suitors are getting really mad. They've figured out that their kids are all dead. So they're like, hey, we got to go take care of this now. So they then all get an army together with pitchforks and all that. And they go try to attack Odysseus and his crew. And there's a little bit of a fight. One person dies, and then Athena comes down and is like, stop.
You want to repeat that last line for the people in the back?
Athena comes down and is like, stop, and it stops.
Basically, I would like us to mostly just talk about the end, because we've talked a lot about Agamemnon throughout the whole book, and basically they just rehash the whole Agamemnon didn't die with glory. Achilles, how lucky you are, you got to die with glory. And sucks to be a suitor. Yeah. Is basically the conclusion of that. And then we have Odysseus once again trying to trick his loved ones into thinking he's someone else, and then he rips off his face, and he's like, just kidding, I've been Odysseus the whole time.
Well, in this case, as he often does, he kind of rips off his pants. He's like, look at the scar on my thigh, it's me.
Oh yeah, he doesn't rip off his face. He always takes off his pants. Or his he's probably more like a kilt tunic situation. And then the real drama, the real stuff we should talk about is basically almost a war breaks out between the fathers of the suitors. So basically it would be like the prominent men of Ithaca and versus Odysseus and everyone on Odysseus' side. Why does Athena intervene and stop the fighting to begin with? And then part 2 of that is like, it actually works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think the first parallel that comes up for me in part 1 of your question, like, why does she intervene in the first place? Especially because she didn't intervene when Odysseus was killing the suitors. It feels like she could have intervened then and stopped the killing earlier, but she didn't. And Odysseus had opportunities to sort of get out of the mass slaughter a couple books ago. Remember, after he shot Antinous in the throat, Eurymachus, one of the other suitors, was basically trying to supplicate himself. He was like, okay, Antinous was the bad one. He was the worst, and we're all going to promise to be good, and we'll repay you for all the cows we took. And Odysseus, kind of is given an out if we trust the suitors. And I don't know, I feel like I trust that they would hold up their end of the bargain because they are genuinely afraid. So I think that Odysseus had an opportunity to not kill all the suitors and to deal with the problem politically rather than militarily. And here at the end, yet again, it feels like this is a problem that could be solved politically, and instead they tries to be solved militarily. And yet then in this case, it has to be solved divinely.
These prominent men make up a sort of court of Ithaca, and he could have taken them to the public court and been like, I'm home. I'm Odysseus. Obviously, these guys deserve some sort of punishment for what they have done to my estate. And I think I think it would be general kind of agreement with that. And then some sort of reparations, like paying back what they ate/took. And that would have been that. But it speaks to like Odysseus' character that like that's not really what he was after. I think it's just an example of how violence feeds into violence.
Yeah.
Or violence just creates more violence. And so it seems like it's very natural for the fathers of the Ithacans to respond in this way.
Can I say Pope uses the Ithacensians, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not significant at all. It's just fun.
Yeah.
Well, I think I remember earlier, I don't remember exactly when, you had mentioned thinking about Ithaca in terms of the generations of men. And right, so basically anybody who was older than Telemachus in fighting age went with Odysseus in the first place. And they either died at Troy or they died on the way home. So that's kind of one generation of people where Odysseus is the only survivor. Then we kind of have Telemachus' generation where all the people who sort of grew up during the war and then sort of in the intervening years, which is basically all the suitors who Odysseus has just kind of like wholesale slaughtered. And then we have their parents who are now the sort of court of Ithaca, who are probably Odysseus's age and older. And Odysseus also seems comfortable potentially killing all of them. And like, that's crazy, right? Like if Odysseus is successful in this, like there kind of would be no men left on Ithaca apart from the servants.
All the old
and
men would be gone too.
Yeah. Apart from the servants and the slave class, like he would have just kind of wiped out literally every other like male of standing in his entire nation, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy, which is a practical reason, you could say a practical reason why Athena thinks she has to get involved to stop a sort of cycle of violence. But I do want to point out, it's like really, before she steps in, it's really funny to me. She talks to Laertes, Odysseus' father, who's there, like with a spear, ready to fight. She says to Laertes, "You are my favorite, Laertes. Pray to the bright-eyed goddess and her father, then lift and hurl your spear." As she said this, Athena breathed great energy inside him. Laertes quickly raised and hurled the spear and struck Eupeithes through his bronze-cheeked helmet, which did not stop the weapon. It pierced through. Then with a thud he fell. His armor clanged around him to the ground. So this Eupeithes is the only guy to die in this altercation.
Who is Antinous' father.
Yes. So Athena lets this like Laertes have this like one great spear moment, and then she like immediately steps in and says, "Ithacans, stop this destructive war, shed no more blood, and go your separate ways at once."
Yeah, it's super, I think, hypocritical in some ways. She's like, "Yeah, kill this guy. Oh wait, no, stop. Okay, yeah."
Yeah, I don't know exactly what happened in the course of like 5 lines to make her decide, oh, actually, I'm going to stop this instead.
Yeah, but it's also then interesting that her initial plea to stop, Odysseus doesn't obey, right? Like, so spoke Athena, and the green fear took hold of them, and in their terror they let fall from their hands their weapons, which all fell on the ground at the cry of the goddess speaking. Striving to save their lives, they turned in flight toward the city. With a terrible cry, much enduring Odysseus, gathering himself together, made a swoop like a high-flown eagle. But the son of Cronos then threw down a smoky thunderbolt, which fell in front of the gray-eyed daughter of the great father. Then the gray-eyed goddess Athena said to Odysseus, son of Laertes and seed of Zeus, resourceful Odysseus, hold hard, stop this quarrel in closing combat, for fear Zeus of the wide brows, son of Cronos, may be angry with you. So Odysseus actually doesn't listen to Athena the first time. It takes Zeus sending a thunderbolt, like to strike the ground near them, and Odysseus to have to be asked a second time to stop.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be read two ways. I think it could just be a final intimidation check or something. Like Odysseus letting out the roar backed by Zeus's thunderbolts. Like just one final like, yeah, and don't mess with that. Don't come around here ever again.
Yes, yeah.
Like it could be like that. And then what Athena says next could just be emphasizing what she said earlier. Or like you imply, like he could intend to just keep doing more harm, but then Athena appeals to his sense of resourcefulness, and because of that, you know, he's like he's convinced.
Yeah, but it's also interesting, right, that she says, stop this quarrel in closing combat, for fear Zeus of the wide brows, the son of Cronos, may be angry with you.
Yeah.
So she's not actually saying don't fight because it's the right thing to do, or don't fight because it's even the most practical thing to do. It's like, don't fight because Zeus doesn't want this to happen and you don't want to piss Zeus off.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the weakest reason imaginable. From my perspective, I guess maybe from Odysseus, that was the most powerful because he's already had to deal with the wrath of the gods in many ways. But yeah, it's not even Athena like putting an end to the conflict for the sense of justice or preservation of the elder generation or anything like that. It's simply framed as like, do the will of the gods and obey.
Yeah, and it's also crazy how it's the tail end of the book, and it is also just so fast. It's only really a page.
Yeah.
Barely a page of text.
And then after that, what I was just reading, there's literally like 4 lines left and then it's done.
Yeah.
And it's so, there's no deliberation. We don't get any sort of insight into what Odysseus was thinking in this moment. We see him kind of just like drop the spear and then that's it.
Yeah. They make solemn oaths of peace.
So I do think, I mean, to go back to our kind of joke at the beginning about the deus ex machina of it all, like this does feel like the epitome of deus ex machina in that it is kind of building towards a climax and then the gods just step in and solve it all.
Yeah. Another iconic deus ex machina in my reading repertoire is how the conflict gets resolved at the end of The Stand by Stephen King. It is also so quick and brief that you almost don't know what happened. There's something about the whole Deus Ex Machina, like it's like a trope that it almost feels like maybe it has to be quick because it
the more you allow time for questioning it, the more it's going to fall apart.
Yeah. And so it has to be this thing that's just like, it happened really fast.
Yeah. I mean, the one that I think about is Lord of the Flies as well, which we just did a special episode about a month ago or so, where it's like chaos, like tension building. Is Ralph going to die? All of a sudden the military people show up and it's like, yep, we're going home. And then it's just over. And in that case, it's not Deus who solves it. It's, you know, the adults, but they kind of in that.
Adultus.
Yeah.
Ex Machina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am very sympathetic to people really disliking this trope. I really dislike it. And I don't really fully understand what it's doing from a literary perspective, either sort of in these kind of older ways or in the more modern variations of them.
I don't think I have a problem with it so much but I do have a problem with Athena's lack of explanation. I think symbolically it makes a lot of sense that the cycle of violence continues and the only thing to stop that cycle has to come from outside of it.
Yeah.
And so it would never have ended if it was just always Odysseus versus something else. And that's what the whole book it's always been, like Odysseus versus something. Like he has a goal, he has something, and there's something in his way. It's like, and that's, it goes back and forth like that the whole time. And so it makes sense to me that it takes this like third thing to come in and solve and like put the narrative to rest in a way.
Yeah. And I do think the other aspect of this is, if we think about the Iliad and the Odyssey as like a 48 book continuum, which I don't think it was ever intended as, but most people nowadays think of it, and we've treated it as such in our podcast. Book 1 of the Iliad ends in a very similar Deus Ex Machina, where Achilles confronts Agamemnon and is basically about to fight him. And then Athena comes in and like pulls his hair and like holds him back from the fight and is like, we'll deal with this a different way. And that sort of leads to Achilles then just going and kind of pouting on the sidelines for most of the Iliad, which we talked about extensively. But there is an interesting, like, Athena sort of cuts off a conflict at both the very beginning and the very end of this sort of sequence, which I think further proves your point of this idea of like mankind is sort of inherently always going to be in states of conflict, and it is only through sort of external intervention that that cycle can be broken.
Yeah, I remember talking at the end of the Iliad, the very end. I forget which god or goddess it is that, but someone divine has to tell Achilles to return the body to King Priam.
Yeah,
and it's not without
that. It's Hermes. Yeah,
it's a Hermes. Yeah, it's not without that. Again, like that external intervention that like Achilles would have done that, and that is like the thing that ends the Iliad and the rage.
So if we're thinking about all of that, then if we think like step back and think about this ending, is that kind of then a really bleak view of humanity that these stories are presenting, that like war and conflict are inevitable among mortals and we are kind of incapable of solving our problems for ourselves without violence in a way that will remain ever cyclical?
It's, I mean, that's definitely like the vibe and the theme I get from this final book. But that's like, it's weirdly out of step with what I feel like we've been talking about for the rest of the Odyssey. Like, I don't know if I mean, maybe like, cause we've got Odysseus, who is, you know, a war veteran, like a guy who has only known a state of war for so long that when he returns home, he can't think of a way to solve his problems that isn't war.
Yeah, and you brought up as well at the very end of book 23, he sort of foreshadows to Penelope that he's going to have to leave again because of the prophecy that Tiresias gave him in the underworld. And so even if this war, like this, I guess, Ithacan civil war is put to bed, Odysseus will still have to go out again. And I don't think killing a bunch of people was a part of Tiresias's prophecy, but as you noted, he says to Penelope, he's like, yeah, I've got to go raid a bunch of people now and get cattle and sheep to, you know, restock my flocks.
Yeah, it's like that wasn't part of the prophecy.
Right.
That seems like something he just wants to do.
Right. And so Odysseus, again, we already kind of know that even with this moment here, putting a stop to this battle conflict, he will not cease his adventuring. I think of the very last line of Tennyson's very famous poem called Ulysses. That is just like a brilliant line of iambic pentameter that ends, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And like that, like really does seem to embody Odysseus in both good and really bad ways, I think.
Yeah.
This idea of his kind of just like relentlessness can be really good because he's able to persevere through literally every obstacle ahead of him. But it also now leads to the sense of like, he literally like can't stop himself from constantly seeking after new conflicts and new problems and new adventures and things like that.
If you've been listening to like all of our Odyssey episodes, I think it's clear that at least I I really like Odysseus as a character. But we've been clear before that just because you like a character as a character, doesn't mean you think they're a morally good person. In fact, I think some of the best characters are not morally upstanding people. Because it's not interesting to read about perfect people or perfect characters. And that holds true now. And like, obviously it holds true that like from the beginning, like Achilles and Odysseus are like deeply flawed and makes the stories like the most interesting possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think we're meant to sort of question here at the end, like, is this peace in Ithaca? Like, they have sworn peace, but like, will Ithaca ever be back to normal? It feels like not.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like anything actually got solved, where Odysseus killed all the suitors, but that just, angered more people. And then he was going to try and kill all those people who were angry at him for killing the first group of people. And the only reason they stopped was because the gods came down and kind of like forced them to shake hands and make nice. Like, it doesn't feel like, a month from now, when one of these people has a conflict about their cattle and they come to Odysseus, for judgment or justice or however it might work, like, that's going to go well. And everybody's going to be like, yeah, let's solve our problems like gentlemen.
I don't have a direct response to that, but what you're saying does make me think of the ways that Shakespearean tragedies end. They end in ways that do seem to end cycles of violence. Like, I'm thinking about Hamlet and how I think the experience of reading or watching Hamlet is that you come to realize that the state of Denmark is so rotten that the only way out of this is for everyone to die, right? And for
Fortinbras to basically come in and just be like, yeah, we're starting over. Like, I'm taking over and I'm in charge now.
Like, it has that same sense of like, all the suitors are killed. The house has been cleansed, and now we're starting over fresh. I mean, it's different because like in Hamlet, everybody dies except like Horatio, right? But it really makes you feel that like the problem has been solved. Like, and I think about Romeo and Juliet. Like, it takes Romeo and Juliet's deaths, like the youngest sort of heirs of these two warring houses. It takes like they're like the tragedy is that they die so young, right? And they die precisely because of their parents' prejudices, or their family's prejudices. And so it takes their deaths for everybody involved to like try to restart, right? To like, so yeah, I was just thinking about that.
After we recorded our episode on book 22 with Odysseus's wholesale slaughter, Belle and I were kind of talking about, how we ended up talking about the sense of justice and morality behind, or justification behind, Odysseus's kind of wholesale slaughter of the suitors. And I think in reflection, I waffled a bit too much, again, trying to sort of take things at face value and sort of be like, well, if you accept Odysseus's kind of justification for all of this, then what he's doing is kind of practical and all this. And Bella, I think, rightfully reminded me that way back in book, I think 5, when we were talking about Odysseus and Calypso, I made the claim that I do stand by, that I don't actually think judging ancient texts by modern values is a bad thing, that we don't have to take these texts and understand them. It can be valuable to try and understand them as they would have been understood at the time with, past senses of justice, but we also can still apply our own as we think about how these books relate to us. Yeah, and so when I think about this ending, I'm challenging myself now to really think not like how would an ancient Greek audience have understood this, or even how does a modern, sort of popular ethics understand this, but like, how do I understand this? And when I think about peace, what I often think about is Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote that peace is not the absence of violence, but the presence of justice. And I think that that applies in really interesting ways here, right? Like there is an absence of violence now in Ithaca, and they seem to think that that is peace. But I think the question that Martin Luther King Jr. would ask is like, but is there justice present? Like just saying, oh, we're not fighting, like that doesn't actually get us anywhere. That just is a kind of like pausing of the conflict. It's not actually solving any issues. And I think because this ending is so abrupt and fast that we don't actually see when they say they swear the solemn oaths of peace, we don't hear what that conversation is like. It's really hard to imagine a genuine sense of justice and fairness has been kind of agreed upon where all sides are now going to sort of go forward.
Thinking about all the conflict throughout this whole book as sort of an outpouring of the conflict of war, right? Mm-hmm. Like the Trojan War sort of has followed Odysseus, and then like along their journey home, like it led to like the deaths of all the men who didn't die in the war, who sort of, you could say that his men did not successfully make the transition home. Mm-hmm. And then once he gets home, not being able to stop any sort of cycle of violence on his own, right? And then that outpours into the killing of the suitors, which then leads to this almost altercation. I guess if we see all of the conflict as having originated with the Trojan War, it makes me think about how like there isn't really justice for deaths that occur in war. Mm-hmm. There is a sense of justification for the side that wins the war, mm-hmm. right? And there is that sense after the fact, once you've won, that like, yes, all the lives that, you know, we sacrificed to win this were worth it. There is mm-hmm. that, but I think that's false. Yeah. And I think that we talked about in the Iliad a lot, that it doesn't matter which side technically wins, everybody loses. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I wonder if this ending leaves you with that sense of, again, that there is no real justice for those who die in wartime. Yeah, and I think if it's not clear, part of why we, I think, struggle to articulate these things is because, right, we try to understand the text from its own sort of ancient sense of morality and justice, and we compare that to what we understand to be a kind of modern sense of justice. But I think our beliefs are even like a third separate thing where we have strong disagreements with even modern standards of like, I'm confident mm-hmm. saying like just war doctrine, like that's oxymoronic in my eyes. Like that's not like, I don't understand that. I very strongly default towards pacifism, like in basically every way. Mm-hmm. And it seems like, I know you tend to as well, maybe not as strongly as I do. Yeah. But yeah, so all of this, like from the very get-go, is always kind of an exercise of separation of things where we're understanding these stories for their literary merit and often like the metaphorical kind of like deeper questions about humanity. But like in so doing, it does feel like when we spend so much time talking about it, we end up sort of coming up with justifications for killing. Whereas in reality, I think there are almost no justifications for killing, like ever. Yeah. And, no, yeah. But I do think that as we've been reading these like last few books of the Odyssey, I'm definitely reading them through like, I'm finding like the literary justification. Right. Yeah, like why would Odysseus be doing this? And why does this make sense in the narrative? Yes. Like in terms of our expectations that have been set up and then and how they're paid off later mm-hmm. and those kinds of things. That's one of the reasons we really like reading old books, is because though it is very challenging, it is quite fun to explore these different headspaces because right, like the sort of moral, ethical, you know, framework of an ancient Greek person, whether it be Homer the author or imagining ourselves as the audience, is like so foreign to me that like the act of trying to understand things from that perspective is like really
intriguing and engaging, even if it is kind of abhorrent to think about. And that, again, that's not just true for Homer, but like any literature. And I think that's the power of literature, is it gives us an opportunity to explore other ways of seeing the world, even if we might disagree with them, but to try and understand them sort of as they are, which I think makes us more intellectually empathetic and thus compassionate to other people with whom we might disagree in the real world.
The thing that fiction is able to do, where it's like able to like put you in the headspace of people doing sometimes terrible things, sometimes not so terrible things, but just like it allows you to have these experiences that you would actually never have in your real life, but you get to have them in these like these safe ways. And also like it's so valuable to, I think, to be able to judge fictional characters without judging real people around you.
Yes, absolutely.
I really like that about fiction, how I'm able to judge the types of choices people make, why they've made them, and place blame and talk about it in like a really like gossipy way without having to do that. Like if you didn't have fiction, then I think you default to kind of doing that with real people. And I think that's kind of where reality TV comes out of. You take real people and you create narratives where you're able to place blame.
Yeah.
And make some people villains and make some people heroes. But it's just like icky to do it with real people.
But that's also where I think the temptation within politics and in sort of modern current event discourse also comes. It's like it is so easy to create sort of abstract villains of, you know, other nations or other people or other political parties or things like that, because that's the comfortable way to understand them. And yeah, it's why I really love my job, my main job, which I'm taking a break from this year, but getting back to teaching high school English, because I think it's really, really, really hard to talk about politics and current events with students these days without alienating yourself or alienating students or things like that. But we can talk about very similar core issues within fiction. Students can then sort of develop their sense of these things, and then I trust that they are smart enough to then be able to take those beliefs that they develop in my class and then apply them to the real world. I don't ever have to explicitly say, I think Victor Frankenstein is very much like Elon Musk, but I trust that through our conversations about Victor Frankenstein, then when students see Elon Musk doing his things, they can be like, wait, that seems kind of similar. Okay, so enough of our waxing philosophical about the joys of reading and studying literature. Let's get back to the Odyssey and yeah, now here at the end, think about the epic as a whole and kind of what it's saying and who Odysseus is.
I've been thinking, because prior to this reread and doing this whole podcast, when asked generically, you know, out in the wild, what's your favorite book? You like to read. What's your favorite book? I would kind of always default to the Odyssey. Sometimes other things, but it's also always a safe thing to say because, well, up until the Christopher Nolan movie, it hasn't been like that popular in pop culture, right?
Well, yeah, or controversial.
Yeah, and Yeah, so it's very much like this like kind of banal thing you can say because most other people haven't read it or really know what you're talking about.
Or they remember it from high school and they remember not understanding it. So if you say it's your favorite, you look impressive and like, oh, you're smart. Yeah.
Well, they probably just remember like the Cyclops.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, okay. And yeah. So I'm actually wondering, my big question for me, maybe for you, is like, after this reread of the Odyssey, do I like it? Do I like the book more or less than I did before rereading it? And when going forward, am I going to find something else to say is my favorite book when people ask me?
Instead, you're going to talk about a Stephen King book, which will reveal very different things about you than saying the Odyssey is your favorite book.
Yeah, I don't know. Whenever people want you to give you like one book that's your favorite, it's like, what's that going to tell you really about me? Nothing, probably. Mostly because the Christopher Nolan movie is going to make the Odyssey this whole thing. It's going to become a thing in people's minds, I think. And I don't know if I want to engage with that when I talk to just like anybody.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but yeah, do you like it more or less?
I definitely like it more because I think, and I'll say the same about the Iliad, because this podcast has proven the sort of insane depth and richness of this, that, you know, when we first read this at St. John's, we were reading 6 books at a time, for, you know, 2-hour conversations. And there was already a lot to talk about. And then when I've taught it, I've taught the Odyssey once with high schoolers, and we read an abridged version. We were reading it kind of slowly, but, you know, I was reading it with high school students. And so I was more geared towards helping them understand the basic level rather than like getting super deep with it.
Yeah.
And like, this has proven that, like, yeah, we never struggled to get at least 30 minutes, usually around 45 minutes of great conversation about one chapter of each of these books.
Yeah.
And it was like, there was never a time where we sat down and was like, oh no, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
And to me, that is just like the greatest testament to the richness of these stories.
Yeah.
And that makes me just, really adore them as sort of things that will constantly have new things to say to me and to everybody who reads them.
I like the Iliad more than I did because I hadn't had as much time thinking about it. But now I feel very confident in like my Iliad knowledge, and I like it more. I like the Odyssey, I think, about the same.
But you also, like, you wrote your senior thesis about the Odyssey, so you had already spent.
I wrote a paper on it. I do think that like this past reread has been a nice continuation of what I was thinking about when I was writing my paper. But also, I think I might have now, because we read it so slow, I think I've thought about it so much, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, I wouldn't want to do another reread because I don't know what I would necessarily get out of another reread. I would, at this point, be interested to read potentially some more secondhand literature. Find some people's whose thoughts I am actually interested in hearing, and reading other people's analyses of certain things.
For me, I'm like, now this makes me really want to teach the Odyssey again with students, because every time I teach a book, even if it's my 3rd, 4th, 5th time having read it, the new things that my students see and say and are interested in always make it more interesting. And so in that case, I'm not reading it for myself. I'm reading it for my students, and then I'm learning less about the text and more about them through their reactions to the text.
Yeah.
And that's a constantly like new and changing and joyous sort of cycle. That I'm even further convinced that the Odyssey would continue to make a great high school English class book. Just got to figure out how to slip it into various curricula. Okay, before we really close out, let's go back to a question that we talked about with Kyle in our very first, almost like episode 0 about the Odyssey, and sort of like, who is Odysseus?
Yeah.
And sort of like,
Who is Odysseus?
What is he as a character and as a person? And who is Odysseus?
Yeah, I go more to images than I do to words when I think of Odysseus. Something that has a solid, upright core that, you know, has like a revolving carousel of faces around it. I think of the bed in the last book. I think of the olive tree bed being this stable thing. Yeah, I also think of like water and the sea in the sense that like the ocean is the same but never the same. Like it's like if I put my foot in the river, is it the same river or is it not the same river?
Right.
That kind of thing. Like the river is the same but different all the time. And that is what Odysseus is.
Yeah, that's the Heraclitus. Like, no man steps in the same river twice, for he is not the same man and it is not the same river.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like, gets to that like paradoxical nature of Odysseus, but also I think that it's meant to point out the paradoxical nature of just like being a human person living, that like every day you are the same but different.
And so, yeah, I like that too. And so I'm curious for you, what is that core of Odysseus that doesn't change, because we've seen, and I think we've talked about many things that do change in terms of his flexibility with lying and putting on disguises and being different things for different people. And so how do you see the core static part of him around which everything else revolves?
Yeah, and honestly, that's like a hard question. That's like kind of where I got all the way up to that in like my thinking with my senior paper I wrote, and then I still can't really get an answer to that. It's like the thing I'm still working on. Mm-hmm. I can't really break that question.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's what makes it so enticing, but also so frustrating to read about Odysseus, because I wonder if the core thing that doesn't change is the desire to change. That I think when you were talking about that, I was thinking about there's this hilarious moment in Frankenstein. It's hilarious from a meta perspective, where Mary Shelley is writing and she inserts a poem that her husband, Percy Shelley, wrote within the text of Frankenstein. And the poem's title is Mutability. And I don't remember the whole poem, but I think the last line of at least the section that she includes is like, naught may endure but mutability. That like the only thing that endures is that things change. Mm-hmm. And like that in itself is a paradox, that the only thing constant is change.
Yeah.
And I think Odysseus also seems to embody that. Again, yeah, in ways that are like exciting because there's always change, but then also like terrifying, because then it kind of is like, if I really accept that, I don't think I want to, because that means there's not actually that much static about me or about mankind. Yeah,
and it seems like the things in Odysseus specifically that seem to perpetuate are kind of his negative traits, like his desire to have more gold, like have more loot,
have more fame.
Yeah, be more well known, go more places, and
tell more stories and make up new stories. Yeah, like I think we joked about it, but I think it's really representative, right? Like Odysseus, even in the last, 8 books of the Odyssey, from when he gets onto Ithaca shore to the end, he like makes up 5 different backstories about himself. He so easily could have like used the same lie over and over again, but he like comes up with 5 separate lies about who he is, because he just seems to love it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's lying for the love of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and so if we return right to the very opening line of the text, this is what we talked about with Kyle in our kind of introductory episode. As we talked about the Iliad, the first Greek word of the Iliad is rage, and the first Greek word of the Odyssey is man. And so this is very much, I don't think necessarily a statement about mankind or humanity, but it is about Odysseus, that like he is the core of what this story is exploring. And then the adjective that is used is palutropos, the sort of many-turning man. And here at the very end of the Odyssey, we get a similar adjective. This is our last Greek time for this journey. In line 541, then the gray-eyed goddess Athena said to Odysseus, son of Laertes and seed of Zeus, resourceful Odysseus, hold hard, stop this quarrel and close in combat. We've read this line before, but this resourceful Odysseus, in this case, it's palumakein, which is a similar construct of palu, meaning poly, many, and then make, like machinations, or machine, like that root of like many mechanisms, resourceful. I think those words, though not the same word, are fairly synonymous with one another, palutropos and palumakein, that the core feature that we get about Odysseus, or we're told about him at the beginning, is his twistiness, and at the end we are reminded yet again of his resourcefulness, his ability to always adapt to whatever situation is at hand. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Athena appeals to his sense of, the Wilson translation says adaptable, but she appeals to his resourcefulness, adaptability, like as a way to convince him that he should stop all this fighting. Sort of like saying, you're so smart, you can find other ways to resolve conflict. Mm-hmm. You don't need to do this.
Yeah, like you're kind of being a dumb jock, just, solving every problem with your sword. Like you're better than this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it feels less like a compliment in the moment. Feels more like she's trying to remind him of who he is, which is an adaptable, resourceful, like capable of many machinations person. And he isn't just a war machine.
Right. Killing the suitors sort of reopened up this kind of bloodlust in him that he had held back for so long and so impressively when he got to Ithaca, that like he kept it back so well. And when it finally let loose, now it has just kind of like continued unchecked, and Athena has to step in to be like, hey, remember, like you're really actually pretty good at holding it back, and you don't have to just like rage.
Yeah. Because we saw in the Iliad how he was not a lot of the Greek guys, they love to boast about how they are like the first into the fray, right? But Odysseus was not the guy who was like first in line. And he got made fun of sometimes for kind of like sitting in the back. Sometimes.
Or when they're in council, like thinking about what we should do, other people are like, yeah, well, let's just fight them. Like, let's go charge and let's attack. And Odysseus is like, well, what if we do this, right? Like, he's like, well, what if we sneak into their camp and we spy on them or we capture some of their people? And, you know, he has been the one who's willing to come up with more creative and less just bash them over the head. Even, right, like with the Trojan horse itself, which is oddly becoming very iconic for the Christopher Nolan movie. Like I just saw pictures of the new Trojan horse popcorn bucket that's going to be out in select theaters. Again, when the Trojan horse isn't actually directly a part of the Odyssey at all, it is a part in flashback. But that in itself, right, is a sign of Odysseus's cleverness and craftiness. And like, we're actually not going to win this war by simply bashing against the wall forever and ever. We need to infiltrate and be clever and sneaky and
but then also like the Trojan horse being a symbol of who Odysseus is where he is one thing on the outside,
right,
and he is a different thing on the inside. And again, like it's tied in with that the idea of gift giving, because the horse is supposed to they bring it in because they think it's a gift, and like that Odysseus always playing with that like, is this a blessing or is this a curse? And those kinds of things.
So to give you now here at the end a sense of what's to come with WINNOW, we are done now with our read through of the Iliad and the Odyssey. So the month of July is kind of going to be dedicated to the movie. So we're planning on having 2 videos come out between now and when the movie launches. We're going to have one that's kind of a whole book, like what to know before you go into watching Christopher Nolan's Odyssey, but mainly focused on the book in terms of like, if you have a friend who, you know, hasn't read the book at all and you want to send them like, here's a one video to watch to summarize. And then we'll have another one more with our kind of like personal predictions and hopes and dreams for the movie before we watch it. And then we'll probably have 2 videos that come out after the movie is out. We'll have one as soon as possible with our kind of like raw gut reactions. Then we'll probably dwell on it. We'll probably watch it a second time and then come out with a more kind of formal, well thought out reaction. And then in the midst of all this, we're going to be moving and settling into our new home, and I'm going to be getting ready to start a new teaching job for next school year. And so our lives are going to kind of be in flux. And so we're thinking about slightly adapting the pace of WINNOW episodes after the month of July.
Yes, because of so many things are going to be different this next year. And when I say year, I always mean school year, because my years are always school years.
Just because I've been teaching pretty much since I graduated from college, like, our year is kind of like August through July.
The year, well, it's like August to June, and then July is this magical, like no man's land time, which I love. But yes, so for the next year, so many things are going to be changing and different for us. So we have decided we want to go to a once a month episode, 1 episode per month.
Rather than
routine.
1 a week, which has been wonderful to do this year. I've been taking a year off and doing a graduate school program online, so we've had way more free time than I've ever had, but I want to be cognizant about my priority being with my students, and not trying to overwhelm my intellectual capacity with you guys, but to dedicate it to my students.
We also don't have any plans to ever completely stop this podcast as of right now. We're thinking this next school year, it will be like a 1 episode per month, downgraded schedule. But we have no plans past the first year. But that doesn't mean that like in future years we won't ramp back up again to every other week, every week. Who knows?
Yeah. And we'll also probably still do special episodes when other book to movie adaptations come out, like we've done with Frankenstein and with Wuthering Heights and with Lord of the Flies this year. There's other good movie adaptations coming out at the end of the year. And so we'll also pepper in those, one off, maybe two off.
Yeah, East of Eden. East of Eden is coming out with Florence Pugh in it. And number one, it makes me read East of Eden, which I need to do. I've been meaning to do for a long time. And number two, the internet only cares about classics when they're being adapted into miniseries or film. That's what we've learned this last year. So we're going to always cover those.
Yeah, and I'm excited for the Claire and the Sun movie. That's not a classic, but it is another excellent book to movie. Well, excellent book that is being adapted into a movie that I hope will be excellent. And if Taika Waititi's oeuvre is anything to hint at, I hope the movie will be excellent as well.
Yes. Okay, so next year, what are we going to read? We have 2 options.
And this is where you come in.
Yes, this is where we would like some feedback on what you, the audience, would prefer. So we were thinking, so it's going to be 1 episode per month, thinking about like 12 months. What are texts that are easily split, into 12 parts? The first thing that has exactly 12 parts is the Aeneid.
Virgil's Aeneid, yes. This will keep us in the epic poetry and even in the sort of Trojan War lore. But historically, obviously, we skip many hundreds of years forward and we switch perspectives from the Greeks to the Trojans, and we get the story of Aeneid's escape from Troy and then journey to ultimately found Rome, and it is kind of a founding myth of Rome.
Yeah.
We have both read the Aeneid once at St. John's, but neither of us have read it more than the once, and I don't think we've ever talked with one another about it.
Yeah.
And so it would be kind of new and fresh for us, which will be more challenging because we're not as familiar and know it as well as we do the Iliad and the Odyssey, but that'll be could be a fun challenge.
Yes. So it would be still epic poetry, but it would be translated from Latin instead of Greek. And something I think I would want to focus on in the Aeneid is I've always read it and thought about it as a ripoff, like the Roman ripoff of the Odyssey. So I would want to go into it trying to understand it as its own great work. That might be challenging,
right.
but
rather than just Homer fan fiction that a lot of people joke that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's okay to be inspired by things that you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, which obviously it is. But yeah, I would like to really understand it as its own thing. So there's this. That's option number 1.
Option number 2 is probably the other text that we have referenced most frequently in our conversation about the Odyssey, and that is the Oresteia by Aeschylus. The Oresteia is a series of 3 tragedies: Agamemnon, the Libation Bearers, and the Eumenides. And I don't know exactly how we'll divide it up into 12. We'll have to maybe get a little bit more creative. It won't divide as easily as the Aeneid will.
Yeah. But there are 3 plays in the cycle, and 3 divided by 12 is 4. So we would spend 4 episodes per play.
Yeah.
Basically.
And I think the pitch that I would make for why we're thinking about this is because it in many ways kind of is another thing that dovetails from the Trojan War. Whereas the Aeneid tells about Aeneas' journey home, the Oresteia begins with Agamemnon's journey home and all of his sort of interactions with Clytemnestra and his death, and then his son's revenge on his mother. And then, as we talked about a couple episodes ago, the sort of third book in this, the Eumenides or the Libation Bearers, depending on the translation, is kind of the first institution of the jury system that now we come to expect as the way justice is meted out, but was not normal back then. And so our conversations would most clearly center around the same questions we've kind of hinted at about justice and fairness and retribution and
Yeah.
cycles of revenge. This is very much even more directly about cycles of violence and how they perpetuate themselves.
Yeah.
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 So this one would be a change of genre where we would go from epic poetry to play, but it would keep us within the kind of Greek world rather than switching over to the Latin world.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do, we're going to leave a comment and we'll pin it to the top. And that comment to sort of vote on, we'll have 2 sub comments, one for the Aeneid and one for the Oresteia. And you can like whichever, or I guess both if you're happy with both. And we will purely base our decision on whichever of those comments gets more likes. You are welcome to leave sub comments giving your pitch or your reason to hopefully persuade other people to vote the way you want. Again, we would be happy doing either of these. And there's a decent chance whichever one we don't do, we might do after that.
Potentially.
We're just not thinking that far ahead. But yeah, vote down below. Let us know your thoughts both about book 24 and the Odyssey, but then particularly if you've stuck around this long, we really care about what you might want to hear us talk about next. Given that, thank you so much for going on this journey with us, both for getting to the end of this long episode about book 24, but also this very long journey that has been pretty much a full year for us.
Yes.
I guess we'll see you for 4 straight videos all about the Christopher Nolan movie, 2 before it comes out and 2 after it comes out. And then at the end of August for our first episode about either the Oresteia or the Aeneid.
Yes. Also, if another trailer drops, we'll probably make a video on that.
Oh yeah, we're recording these in advance, so there might have been already another video.
Yeah, there might be some extra videos plopped in there where, we're recording this in advance.
Until next time.
Happy reading.
And happy watching if you go see the movie.